Good morning. So today I want to talk to you about the French and Indian War, also known as the Seven Years' War. In fact, it's even called, if you go as far as Sweden and Prussia, they actually refer to it as the Pomeranian War. So there you go. So in 1754, this war is going to start. It's actually not going to end until 1763 with what's known as the Treaty of Paris. The war provided Britain with enormous territorial gains in North America, but disputes are going to lead after this that are going to eventually lead to the American Revolution. So basically, what the problem is there were very poorly drawn boundary lines between where the French and the British imperial territories were. And so this is going to pit the colonists, the French, the British, and even the Iroquois Confederation, which controlled most of upstate New York and parts of northern Pennsylvania, in this tension against each other. And so in 1753, before hostilities break out, Britain controlled the 13 colonies up to the Appalachian Mountains, but beyond lay New France, this large, vast, sparsely settled colony that stretched from Louisiana through the Mississippi Valley and the Great Lakes to Canada. One particularly hot territory at this time was the Ohio River Valley. The French had constructed a number of forts in the region and attempted to strengthen the claim on the area. British colonial forces, led by young 21-year-old Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, gets this great idea to leave Fort Necessity and to go and attack Fort Duquesne. Now, what happened is Washington sent a few people on patrol. They end up shooting a French officer. This does not go well. And so these soldiers, the French soldiers from Fort Duquesne, are going to come back and they're going to attack Fort Necessity. Now, what they do is what I call the slow burn. They surround, they lay siege, and they wait. They starve them out. And George Washington is actually forced to surrender on July 4th, 1754. Now, around the same time, what you're going to see is Benjamin Franklin is going to call for all of the colonies to meet together in what becomes known as the Albany Plan. The Albany Plan had two purposes. It's where the join or die snake cartoon comes in. Purpose number one, unite the colonists. Fail. Most of the colonies didn't even show up. Purpose number two, to get supplies to get to the Iroquois and a chance to kind of pull them on their side, almost like a bribe, if you will. And that was a failure too, because the Iroquois never exclusively commit to the British side. It's called the French and Indian War because most of the Native Americans and the French, the indigenous people and the French, fought together against the British and the colonists. But that's not 100% true. But you can basically know that most of the natives tended to side with the French because the French were basically kinder to them than the English people. So the war doesn't start well for the British. The British government is going to send General Edward Braddock, under whom Washington is going to serve, because let's face it, that first little thing didn't go so hot. He's going to be the commander in chief for the British North American forces, but he alienates his potential Native American allies. Not smart, Braddock. And colonial leaders do not want to cooperate with him. In fact, July 13th, 1755, not because of those things, though, Braddock is actually going to die after being mortally wounded in an ambush on a failed expedition to capture Fort Duquesne in present day Pittsburgh. 1757, though, a couple years later, the war does begin to turn in favor of the British. British forces are going to have some success in India because both the British and the French at the time are fighting for India. And in 1759, the British armies invaded and conquered Canada. This was huge. There is a great, brilliant story about a battle there and scaling the cliffs and all sorts of good times when you look about Montreal and Quebec. So, facing defeat in North America, the French government attempted to engage the British in peace negotiations. But British Minister William Pitt, who was the Secretary for Southern Affairs, sought not only the French concession of Canada, but he also wanted some more things from the French government that they found completely unacceptable. So, what's going to end up happening is Spanish King Charles III offered to come to the aid of his cousin, who is King Louis XV. So, originally, the idea was that alliance would pressure the British to a peace agreement, feeling like they didn't want to fight both. However, the French see it as, hey, let's go to war. We have somebody else on our side. And so they begin to fight again. British naval strength and Spanish ineffectiveness is going to lead to British success. By 1763, the French and Spanish diplomats begin to seek peace, and this is going to result in the Treaty of Paris 1763. Through this Treaty of Paris, Great Britain secured significant territorial gains in North America, which included all French territory east of the Mississippi as well as Spanish Florida. Although the treaty does return Cuba to Spain, the only place that France gets to keep in this entire hemisphere is the little tiny spot of Haiti. That's it. They lose Louisiana at this time. It actually goes to the Spanish. Now, it eventually will come back to the French, but that's another conversation for another lesson. Unfortunately for the British, these fruits of victory brought all sorts of problems with Great Britain's American colonies. The war had become expensive, and the British government's attempts to impose taxes on the colonists to help cover these expenses resulted in increasing colonial resentment of British attempts to expand their colonies. But that will be for another lesson.